I'm going to ask you a question at the end. I'm very curious to know about my fellow NIO Stock retail investors. There's an article that made me think about this, so I wanted to share that. I will share the article a little bit later. But first, I want to hone in on and kind of set the table for this because this is a 6-month window when NIO Stock probably made its biggest moves. And so here's what I've done. I've zoomed in on, this is May 26th over here on the left-hand side from 2020. And I went through this date right here, which is November 23rd of 2020. Now, the price range for that was on the May 26th date. The low for NIO Stock was $3.40. The high was $3.83. The low and high on this date in November on the 23rd, less than 6 months later, the low was $50.48. The high was $55.70. That is a meteoric rise in a very short period of time. But I also want to come back over here now, because if you'll direct your attention to the bottom of the screen where I have on the ticker the 3 short-term stock price indicators for NIO, the first is daily trade volume. That's the easiest thing that I kind of track on a daily basis. And on this date, May 26, 2020, when NIO Stock was trading about $3.50, there were a little over 60 million shares traded on that trade day. But if you come over here to after it made that meteoric move, the daily trade volume was over 271 million shares traded. And that's the kind of thing that I'm just tracking in an ongoing fashion moving forward with respect to short-term stock price action. The other is the FTDs that fails to deliver. That's when there could have been naked shorting going on. Obviously, these are much elevated levels compared to this time where the stock, even just in these couple of months, made really big moves as those dropped off. So I don't just want to stop there, though. Sentiment matters. Interestingly enough, the sentiment has been really low. And I think a big reason for that, if we look at the full history of NIO Stock with the FTDs, I think there's a pretty obvious correlation with the re-emergence of FTDs, the white lines, along with this 3-year downtrend that we've seen for the stock price. And there's more to it that I'm not going to share in this video, maybe in another one, because I think there's another factor that could be in play. But I also want to hone in on this time frame. This is when NIO Stock obviously was at its high point, the yellow indicating stock price. But at that same time, these FTDs had really dropped off. Now, if you're wondering about the 6-month window that I highlighted, this was the peak or the end of that time frame that I highlighted, that 6-month window, and it started right about here. So it's not the low, and it's also not the high for NIO Stock. But that 6-month window does show us a couple of things. I think it showed us that the trade volume spiking in conjunction with the FTDs dropping off can make a big difference on the short-term stock price action, especially if sentiment improves. Now, I want to go to the article that actually made me think about the question that I'm going to ask you, because I was really kind of curious once I saw this. Now, to be clear, they did not clearly identify who they are as the authors of the article. They did say they don't have a position in NIO, so I'll just speculate and call them fairly neutral. But this is what caught my attention. Does retail really own 48% of NIO? I'm really curious if that's the case. If it really is the case, and this is kind of the nod that I have, is because they say here, the general public, including retail investors, own 48% stake in the company and hence can't be easily ignored. They also go on to say, I think they talked about hedge funds not having a big percentage of the company. And I think maybe this made me think the state or government owned 20% of NIO. At first, I thought they were suggesting that was the Chinese government, but then later they talk about the UAE. So I think maybe they're actually referencing CYVN. And so if that's the case, then you have Middle East partners of NIO who do own a big percentage and who are long-term and have bought in with William Lee, the CEO founder, and the man who still retains ownership and control of the company, even though he doesn't have the biggest share position, but he still has a significant share position. These folks are all long-term. And if they have a percentage, and if retail investors have even, heck, 40%, then I'm just curious, because I know of some retail investors who have tens of thousands, even 100,000 shares or more. And if what has happened during the time frame, this 3-year period where maybe big money has kind of left, but retail has been buying things up, then there are kind of a couple of things that I wonder, if they could play out and what that looks like. First off, I think CYVN is going to maintain a long-term position in View. I think William Lee will do the same. The company's not even profitable yet. So the idea that it could make a move like this with the stock price before profitability was pretty amazing, I think. And so I don't know if we will see something like that play out again. But because it has happened before, and because even in the 6-month time frame, NIO moved more to the upside than in the 3-year, downtrend where we saw the reemergence of FTDs. And yet it still went $45 to sub $4 versus 350-ish to over 55 in a much faster time. And I guess what I'm thinking is it can obviously move up a lot faster than it moves down. So here's my question for you. What are your thoughts? At what point would you want to do something? Or are you thinking of doing something? I know some who are just going to hold. I know some who are holding for children, meaning the next generation. So I'm just curious. I love hearing from other people. It's an opportunity for me to do some market research and get thoughts and insights and what others are thinking. But I wanted to already cover and kind of remind people about how fast NIO Stock can move up, and then drill down a little bit on that 6-month window. But then also, when I saw the article, I just couldn't help myself. I thought, okay, I've got to ask some of the people, what their thoughts are, because I'll just be curious. I do think, I'll just be frank, this is only my opinion. My thinking is, yes, we're going to see NIO Stock go beyond and to new all-time highs. Frankly, I'll personally be disappointed if we don't see, triple digits at some point in the future. I don't know what the time frame is. I don't know. I think profitability is really key for crushing the short thesis, but that doesn't mean it can't run before then. We've seen it happen. So my thinking is we will see big moves with the stock price. And as I'm a curious guy and I like to know what others are thinking and what they might do, and I realize people may say things and then when it happens, they may go, okay, no, I'm going to sell. I want to get some profits now. I'm just curious if people are thinking about that or taking that into consideration. I like to consider all or as many different scenarios as possible. This was an opportunity for me to share some of that and try to get some feedback, some input, and thoughts from others. So thanks if you stuck around to the end, and drop it in the comments. I want to hear from you. I'm really curious about this. Have a great day. I'll be back with more content before you know it. I'll see y'all again very soon.